Hello, welcome back to book review of Lady Colin Campbell's book and Chapter 7. Full disclaimer can be found below in the description, and I hope you'll subscribe. Please leave your comments. I'm trying to figure out if something's going on with the comments section, and comments have been turned on, but I'm not seeing any, so if you could just leave me a comment. Please like if you enjoy the book and its excerpts. Chapter 7. In the immediate aftermath of Meghan and Harry's marriage, no one had any idea about her ambitions exceeded the platform of a royal duchess. Everyone in royal circles believed that she had acquired the greatest role of her life, that, being the actress she was, she would play it to the hilt. To quote her, she hit the ground running following her marriage. She is an exemplary performer, and at first it looked as if her acting skills would be successfully deployed onto the wider stage that she had acquired long with the title before she became Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. Meghan had great charm. At first, as she performed her royal duty, she came across as warm, kind, down-to-earth, sweet, modest, and eager to please. Her first post-marital engagement without Harry was to join the Queen on the royal train to Chester, of northwest of England. The monarch had a full schedule of engagements, from unveiling a plaque declaring the Hatton Bridge, which crosses the Don River, to inspecting a group of Syrian refugees, traditional craft work, and dance performed by a group of local recovering addicts. The Queen was working the crowds, while Meghan was instructed to work the crowds on the left. Royal aides informed the press that Elizabeth II had asked her granddaughter-in-law along specifically to show her the breadth of work the royal family carries out. Meghan said how pleased she was to be there, and the Queen, notably under-demonstrative as a matter of course, was unusually animated, smiling up a storm and laughing at Meghan asides when they were seated together. Although the press judged the event a great success, those who were more dispassionate queried Meghan's boycotting of royal attire. The Queen was dressed in one of her typical outfits, and Meghan was told that that she would need to wear a hat and what would be appropriate colors. Then it goes on to say Meghan wore an off-white Givenchy dress with a black belt, black clutch, bag, and black shoes. While she looked chic, she did not look royal, and to those in the know, she had broken several sartorial guidelines. Number 1, she had worn no hat, which is the custom for the royal women to wear hats on such occasions, especially when accompanying the Queen. Number 2, she had worn black and white, which are two of the royal mourning colors, along with mauve. Number 3, she had worn a French designer, not a British, which was in breach of the protocol whereby British royals wear British designers to drum up support for Britain trade when on royal duties. So here we have it. Meghan is already not doing what she's supposed to do, and people want to say she was picked on. But no, she knew what the rules were. She was instructed by the Queen's assistants before going on and even the day of, and she still refused to do that. While in some comfort that the press did not revile Meghan for the breaches, they did notice that she had ignored royal protocol for what was her introductory engagement with Her Majesty. This was hardly the way to garner praise, yet Meghan seemed so eager to please that she was given the benefit of the doubt. Behind the scenes, however, those of us in the know soon learned that Angela Kelly, the Queen's dresser, personal designer, and even more importantly, her personal friend, had rung Meghan up and informed her that the Queen would be wearing a hat, which was palace speak for "you are to wear one too." Meghan had informed Miss Kelly that she would not be wearing one, and that was that. Was this a sign of things that to come, of a policy of deliberate disregard on her part for the traditions of the institution into which she had married? Then it goes on to say, and I'm just reading highlighted areas that after I've read that I thought you might be interested in. Recently, there had been so many little signs that she did not feel it necessary to be constrained by any rules of conduct but her own, chief of which had been her failure to curtsy to the Queen on her wedding day following the signing of the register at St. George's Chapel. Meghan continues to not follow protocol. Soon it emerged that Meghan had indeed chosen to devise her own protocol where attire was concerned. Despite being undeniably stylish and chic, her choice of colors was more New York 7th Avenue than House of Windsor or, come to it, House of Oranges or any of the other houses. Not surprisingly, the British press noticed. They knew only too well that the royal women usually wear colored garments so that they will stand out in a crowd. It is deemed polite that you make yourself visible to those who have taken the trouble to come see you. It is one of the many minor and unspoken protocols based upon consideration under which all royal women function. All royal women must follow these rules, guys. It is a form of respect to the public, and disregarding the protocol disrespects both the public and the sentiment behind the customs. So you're disrespecting the Queen and the people who are there because you're not following tradition. Meghan was seldom seen in anything but a mourning color, being black her favorite, but gray and white also featuring variables. It was only a matter of time before Meghan's choices began attracting press attention. Yet, some of her choices so flagrantly breached the rules of what constitutes acceptable attire for women of rank that she either had bad advice or refused to take any of it. For instance, her tendency to wear cocktail attire during the day meant that she was either ignorant of what was acceptable attire, even though she'd been told in certain situations and at certain times for women of her station, or then she cared more for looking good than she did for dressing with appropriate respect for the customs of her adopted land, and was thumbing her nose at British customs at the very moment she wanted everyone's approbation for her how beautiful she looked. You do not wear transparent sleeves during the day except with formal morning wear. They are cocktail wear to be worn only after sundown. 2, you do not wear necklines that are scooped out during the day unless the fabric of the garment is clearly daytime attire, such as an opaque cotton. And this was the scoop neck that she was so famous for always wearing, and even her wedding dress. Worse was to follow when Meghan joined the royal family for her first appearance on the balcony at Buckingham Palace, following the Trooping of the Colours ceremony at House Guards Parade in 2018. Although she wore a beautiful pale pink Carolina Herrera dress with huge covered buttons that screamed couture, it spotted an off-the-shoulder neckline as if the dress code had been cocktail or evening attire, not formal day wear. She complemented the dress with a fetching Philip Tracy hat of the same color, though her choice of handbag was also unorthodox, a white Carolina Herrera clutch bordered in gold metal. One does not wear gold accessories in the day. They are regarded as vulgar and inelegant, or what the interior designer Nikki Halsom's would dismiss as simply common. She always selected the wrong clothing. She wouldn't listen to anyone in the at the palace or any of the courtiers. A month later, Meghan was back in cocktail wear during the day on the Buckingham Palace balcony. Yet again, another couture dress by yet another foreign designer. Yet again, the dress by Dior was beautiful, but once more, it was, in Britain terms, inappropriate for the occasion. It was a black silk and a boutonne neckline, a style that is only ever worn after dark or with informal attire such as beachwear, except for wedding dresses. Her hat was another stylish concoction, mercifully by another British milliner, this time Stephen Jones, but again her handbag was an evening bag, now a silk clutch that was luckily more discreet than the gold medal chosen the month before. To the sartorially knowledgeable, what made this faux pas even more undesirable was that Meghan had chosen to attend church in cocktail wear. The occasion was celebrating the centenary of the founding of the Royal Air Force. One princess said, "I only hope the press doesn't notice her breaches of dress code. We don't want them criticizing her. I gather she is extremely sensitive to criticism. In fact, she requires constant adulation." Unfortunately, Meghan's inappropriate attire was not the only thing exciting comment. Whenever she was greeting strangers, she would inform them how pleased she was to meet them. For a plethora of good reasons, the standard greeting has always been, "How do you do?" Firstly, it is friendly and neutral while covering a multitude of possibilities without opening you up to criticism. While that seem reserved to those of a more effusive nature, the reason why it has always been standard is simple. You cannot know that you are pleased to meet someone until you have met them. You are therefore laying claim to a sentiment that you do not yet possess if you tell them how pleased you are. Insincerity is a mark of bad character. Hypocrisy is indicative of weakness as well as duplicity. If you really want to stretch the boundaries and show strangers how warm and friendly you are, it is acceptable to say, "Thank you so much for coming." Though the old standard royal questions such as, "Have you traveled far?" or "Have you been waiting long?" are equally cordial without running the risk of overstepping the mark and inadvertently descending into either insincerity or hypocrisy. With the establishment, Harry would not correct Meghan. People regretted that Harry, who had grown out of his schoolboy tendency to antagonize and had become a popular public figure, was not pointing out to Meghan how some of her modes of conduct jarred. In fact, rather than tucking her under his wing and steering her in the right direction, he either ignored the breaches or then backed them up, even when she was being unreasonable. This was counterproductive, for Harry could not expect a whole institution, much less an entire nation, to alter its modes of conduct to facilitate a woman who, either through her ignorance or because she honestly thought her way was the better way, wanted to do things as she pleased, and if she ruffled feather, the falling was not hers, but the owner of the feathers. By taking a stance he did, Harry was losing respect left, right, and center. This was a pity. He had gone from being a trying teenager to a respected young man who had had the common touch and was popular with everyone he came into contact with, from those with whom he worked closely to strangers. His conduct when he had been with Chelsea Davy and Cressida Bonus had been so markedly different that it was with Meghan. The observers surmised Meghan must be responsible for the changes within him. With Chelsea and Cressida, there had been no awkwardness with anyone except the press, except when he was in his cups, feeling lonely, and subject to striking out angrily at the nearest onlooker. Otherwise, he had fitted in with both girls' circles, and they had fitted in with his. By the early days of Meghan and Harry's marriage, this had changed. Harry and Meghan were no longer just another couple amongst friends. There was an aura of specialness that now emanated from them jointly. They were more evolved, more mindful, more conscious, more woke. They were no longer ordinary human beings in their minds, but extraordinarily people whose awareness of their destiny to change and save the world separated them from mere mortals like Harry's friends. As they settled into marriage, Meghan's us against the world attitude began to predominate. They had been put in distance between Harry and some of his oldest and closest friends, whom she clearly thought were too frivolous or too traditional for an aware and enlightenment couple like Harry and herself, and he had adopted her attitude as well. Not only was there payback time for those who had done as William and Tom Inskep did when they had advised Harry to take things more slowly, and who now found themselves being marginalized, but those who remained in favor began to notice that Harry was no longer as open nor as much fun as he had been. Under Meghan's influence, he was far more serious. Meghan, with Harry's friends, she couldn't even be bothered to be friendly, and nor did she make any attempt to fit in the way she had done while they were on the up and up in Canada, New York, and London prior to meeting Harry. Now that she was a princess of the United Kingdom, she had a gravity to match to, and to the regret of his old friends, so did Harry, who had become as heavy-going as Meghan. Even when Harry remained in touch with a few old friends from the past who had somehow miraculously escaped the coal, Meghan made it clear to them that she had nothing in common with any of Harry's friends, or their wives and girlfriends, with very few exceptions. Nowhere was clearer than the wedding of Harry Ludgrove's schoolmate Charlie Van Stossenbingsy, to Daisy Jinks, held in a field adjoining the family home where dogs and other animals came and went and bales of hay were everywhere, and the atmosphere was typically English upper class. Everyone was relaxed. Most people knew one another well and had done so for many years. These were the creme de la creme of English society, people who were warm, friendly, without side. Those on their periphery who did not know Meghan were delighted to meet her. Contrary to what foreigners often thought, the British are very friendly and forthcoming, at least in the upper classes. It was therefore entirely with expectation when a girl went up to Meghan, introduced herself, and said how beautiful she thought she was. She said she knew it was Meghan's birthday and wished her a happy birthday. Meghan looked at her as if she had committed a great faux pas by speaking to her, and without saying a word, Meghan walked off. She was very cold. Someone who witnessed the exchange told me it was really rude. One can only hope that Meghan was under the impression that people aren't supposed to speak to royalty first. Otherwise, her reaction was absolutely inexcusable. None of the other royal women would have behaved as she did, with the exception of maybe Princess Michael of Kent, who takes herself as seriously as Meghan does. Worse followed during the wedding breakfast. Another girl told Meghan how much she admired her and how wonderful she thought she and Harry were married and how well she thought she was doing. She told her she was rooting for them and wished them well. Meghan's response? She looked her up and down, turned away without saying a word, and froze her out for the rest of the wedding breakfast. She was beautifully turned out, one of the guests told me. I was surprised at how small she is, but she is undeniably good looking. She was really well dressed, but more for a town wedding than one in the country. She had on high heels while everyone else was in espadrilles. I mean, the wedding was in a field. You don't wear high heels to a wedding that you know is going to be in a field. You could see she wasn't comfortable around us. It was your typical English wedding. Everyone knew everyone else, and everyone was bright and bouncy. Maybe she felt like a fish out of water. Harry was the best man, but when he wasn't performing his best man duties, he and Meghan kept to themselves and only to themselves. Someone else told me Meghan actually walked off and went to sit on her own on more than one occasion, and that Harry joined her every time he noticed that she was missing. Wow, I'm telling you, she demands all of his attention, and this was from the very start, and she was so demanding to Harry. Oh, goodness, this has a ring of truth. I was told by many different sources that Meghan had a habit of walking off from big groups. If she doesn't feel comfortable, she doesn't make any effort to fit in. She removes herself from the scene. However, she only does this when she is with a man or when there is a man around on whom she has her eye. He then has a choice. Okay. By the time Meghan's various techniques had worked so well with Harry, she was happily, willingly, and entirely in her thrall. While his friends were pleased to see him happy, they were perplexed as to how anyone could have undergone such a complete change to their identity. Harry and Meghan had begun to behave as if they functioned in a bubble, with no thought or care for how their actions impacted upon their associates. Although they could be perfectly charming when they wanted to be, they often crossed a line where the traditional modes of behavior with which most of his friends conducted themselves. This was nowhere more apparent than when they attended dinner parties. The public displays of affection were so ostentatious that onlookers found their conduct very embarrassing. Firstly, they would huddle together, putting up an invisible barrier between themselves and everyone else, as if they were the only couple that had ever been in love, and that everyone present was such a huge insignificance that they had no time for them. Rather than partake of the occasion by fitting in with the group, they would be completely absorbed in each other, whispering into each other's ears as if they were only two people that existed. Whispering is bad manners. It excludes others, but Harry and Meghan seemed to have no awareness of the offense they were causing as they froze everyone out from their hallowed communication. Distasteful as such displays were to people who had not been reared from childhood with the injunction of no PDAs, no public displays of affection, What catapulted their conduct into insupportability was the havoc they created when it came to be seated for dinner. The custom has always been that married couples are never seated beside each other. Engaged couples, yes, but married couples, no. There are no sound reasons for this, aside from the fact that people who live together will ordinarily have less to say to each other than to those who are less frequently seen. The main purpose of a dinner party is for people to mix, have good conversations, and a good time. This is not possible unless couples are dispersed around the dinner table. Hostesses take seating arrangements seriously because a place at a table is not only important in terms of creating good interchange, but also for other reasons. The most honored man is placed at the right hand of the hostess, the next at her left, while the rule is reversed for the host and women. Harry and Meghan ruined several dinner parties by refusing to be separated. Someone who witnessed them in action told me, rather than take part in the occasion, they behaved as if they were new lovers in heat. Oh, that's awful. A royal cousin told me, unsurprisingly, people stopped asking them to dinner. Another complaint about the newlyweds was that they had become heavy-going. Conversations was no longer the pleasure it had been before that they had discovered each other and set out on their journey to reshape the world. Gone were Harry's light banter, Meghan's giggly wit, and girly charm. On the few occasions they actually gave anyone space to enter their magic circle, their conversation was intense and leaden. While Meghan could still be personable with her own friends, with Harry's she created a chasm of disinterestedness, deepened by her flamboyant wokeness, and he mirrored her. To people who knew Harry's parents, Meghan was doing with their son and his friends a variation of what Diana had done with Charles and his. Diana had been a metropolitan babe who had found country life boring. Charles and his friends had been country lovers, although she was more of a naturalist than Diana. For instance, she used to fish with her father. Meghan was so pointedly anti-everything that the royal world represented that people feared that she intended to detach Harry from his roots. Everyone who cares about him simply hopes that Harry won't be too hurt if things go wrong, which, by the look of it, has become an increasingly likely scenario, one of his friends said. The old Harry has ceased to exist, and the new Harry has taken his place. But despite the reservations his circle now had about the effect his marriage was having upon him in the wider world, he and Meghan were becoming global superstars. She was revered as a style icon, while he was admired for being the down-to-earth charmer that he had once been. It is impossible that Meghan did not appreciate that she was behaving in a way that would trigger opposition. Meghan is also a very sensitive person who basks in the appreciation of others and withdraws when she fails to get it. So she's always got to be admired, looked up to. You've got to always be stroking her ego, or she wants nothing to do with you. So it goes on to say, then she nurses her wounded feelings as she takes a deep and personal offense as not receiving what she regards as her just deserts. Forces of nature who advocate change and militantly declare their intention to alter scenarios others might want to remain intact, inevitably face a backlash. It would not be long in coming as Hurricane Meghan, as she was sometimes called at the palace, blew through the corridors of power with Harry's full backing. Rather than accept the dangers inherent in their postures, Harry and Meghan decided that those who preached caution to them should be dismissed as traditionalists who simply didn't get it. They decided that tradition was the problem here. The word tradition, as used by them, became a catch-all for any aspects of the status quo for which they did not agree. Soon they were complaining that they were being hemmed in by tradition. Tradition to them became a dirty word, which they used to pour scorn onto anyone who stood between them and what they wanted. They were also buzzwords to annihilate their adversaries, whether it was a hostess trying to seat them where she wanted to at her dinner table, or a courtier wanting Meghan to respect the dress code of royalty, or Harry dismissing the concerns of courtiers who were trying to rein him and Meghan in as they bombarded their staff with 20 and 50 new ideas every day. They dismissed all concerns about potentially undesirable consequences. So they wouldn't listen to anybody. They were trying to help them, trying to tell them Meghan wanted to do it her way, and Harry was willing to follow. Okay, it goes on to say they openly disparaged other members of the royal family for their style of doing things, disdaining it as being stiff, out of touch, traditional, uptight, and old-fashioned. They criticized the courtiers for being hopelessly out of date and inefficient, declaring that they weren't savvy like Meghan and her Hollywood colleagues. Well, they knew exactly what they've been doing. They've been doing this since the monarchy has existed, and they know how to run it. The monarchy was still intact, but it seems that Meghan's hell-bent on destroying everything that it has built up. And the royal family is all about tradition, and that's what the British people and the other members of the Commonwealth they expect from them. They want tradition. They want to know how things will go, and they want consistency in how they rule. Okay. These complaints did nothing to improve the atmosphere surrounding the couple, but some of the wording so alien to any royal or aristocratic and too characteristic of someone of Meghan's type and background that listeners concluded that she was writing the script, even though both she and Harry were voicing identical concerns. A few words in particular were viewed at the palace as giveaways as who was really the architect and who was architect of the dissatisfaction. Meghan and Harry were ferocious in using the word exploit to describe the failure of the palace to capitalize upon what they described as its unique or special gifts and star quality. See, Meghan always wanted to be a star. She wanted to be the star of the royal family. She wanted to be globally known. She wanted all this adoration, but she wanted to do things her way, and that's not what being a member of the royal family is. And for all the sugars who may be listening, these are the things that we had problems with. It had nothing to do with Meghan's race. It was all about the way she behaved and her failure to follow the rules and to follow the tradition. She can't come in and expect to turn the royal family's hundreds of years of tradition upside down, but that's what she wanted to do, and it seemed as though Harry tried telling her, but at some point he just gave in. Whatever Meghan wants, she gets. All right, back to the book. Both Meghan and Harry are headstrong. There was no doubt at the palace that they were both sincere in their desire to achieving their goals, but there was also no doubt that they had become troublesome. He had always taken a skillful handling. Volatile and emotional, he is very much both his parents' son. For Charles and Diana shared explosive and at times doggedly temperamental personality traits. Meghan was equally impassioned and determined. Even in Hollywood, where pushiness is often regarded as a virtue and being called a hustler is complimentary, Meghan had acquired a reputation for being in a class of her own. While her admirers commended her for her tenacity and toughness, one producer told me that he regarded this as being very pushy, and she was a real piece of work. She was greedy and had far too high of opinion of herself, and was a actor player who had a compulsion to always push for more. If you'd offer her California, she'd demand Arizona as well. And if you didn't give it to her, then you were victimizing her. So she learned early on how to play the victim. And this is one of the reasons that she kept Harry from getting to know her father and other family members, because of all the lies that she had told him about how she had a tough childhood and how she had to pay for her own college. These were all lies. So that's why Harry made the comment on the radio podcast one day that for the first time, Meghan truly felt that she had a family, and that upset Meghan's father so much and the rest of his family. But this was what Meghan had a goal. She had a plan, and she was executing it every step of the way she wanted to. All right, the book says, one hurdle which they had introduced to keeping everyone at arm's length, and which began to acquire a life of its own, was their ever-increasing demand for privacy, as this was often directed at the most surprising and unexpected of sources. It caused all kinds of problems within their social and family circle. A case point was the way they behaved at Princess Eugenie of York's wedding to Jack Brooksbank, brand ambassador of George Clooney's tequila company. Who knows whether there was an element of payback because Meghan hadn't been allowed to pinch Grand Duchess Zena's tiara from Eugenie for her own wedding, or whether they were now so wrapped up in themselves that they couldn't think beyond their own immediate concerns. A royal cousin told me, but they found the perfect way to steal Eugenie's thunder, to drive home the point that they were a unit beyond the reach of everyone else. They spent the whole time going from person to person, sharing the news that Meghan was pregnant. This from the couple who had only a few short months before caused grave offense when asked how their honeymoon had gone and where they had been, had responded, "We're not telling anyone. We're keeping that for ourselves." It was as if Meghan and Harry had decided that they had to protect themselves against all sorts of people who wished them well and were cheering them on to success. By creating walls, they were deliberately excluding people who were deeply offended to be shut out. This is where everything was just all going wrong, and it was all Meghan's actions, and she wants to play the victim and blame the royal family. Okay, the book says, since Meghan and Harry had been married for only a few months, and the first year of marriage is customarily viewed as a period of adjustment, everyone would mark down the increasing signs of alienation to something it was not. Had they known that Meghan was either unwilling or unable to make the compromises necessary to fit in her new role as royal, they would have been horrified. But no one knew at that time. Right? Let me go around. Got to skip a few pages here. There's a few pictures in the book, not many. Go back to my next highlighted area. Fed up with her image being defaced the way it was being by them, she took advantage of the opportunity to speak in Fiji, gave her to shoot down her father's claims of having put her through Northwestern University. She categorically stated that she had done so by taking part-time jobs and resorting to student loans. Honor and her image were restored. Depending on your point of view, it was either a terrible mistake on Meghan's part or it was tactfully clever move, which in some way towards shoring up the sympathy she deserved and thrived upon her supporters. Nevertheless, royals do not use official tours to further their own vendettas. They were there to represent the nation and to further its objectives. Although it was not yet generally known, her father had the bills to prove that he had put her through college, and all he would need to do, and he would ultimately do when she embarked upon the lawsuit against the Mail on Sunday, was to give a newspaper side of them. This would prove that Meghan's struggles, though real enough, were mostly within herself and not external the way she was claiming to everyone and playing the victim card and the race card. By far, the most unfortunate consequence was that she had reopened the old wound that was best left to heal on its own. Most of all, the damage to her reputation had been caused by her troubled relationship with her father. Although the consequences seem to have been very slight in the United States, where pride in Meghan as an American princess was still pronounced, and few people seemed to understand why she was not being relished in Britain. And I'm going to say this, as an American, we didn't think that way. We Americans saw exactly what the British people saw, and we knew what she was doing, and we could see it, and we saw how devastating it was, and we felt sorry for the royal family. We did not even know who Meghan was until it was announced that she was dating Harry or engaged to Harry, and she was not anyone that anyone knew of or had any respect for. And immediately, even watching the interview of their engagement, we knew exactly, we could see right through her. Believe me, she didn't have people in the USA fooled. And while we do have an interest, and a lot of us are royalists, we knew at the very start that there was something worrisome going on, and that it looked like things might not work out the way everyone had hoped. That degree of harshness did not sit well with the average person in Britain. And her sister Samantha waded in, accusing Meghan of being a liar and an ingrate for having denied her father's generosity. Okay, on to the next page. The one inexcusable and the upper reaches of society had always been treating staff in an untoward way. No matter how charming you are to your equals, no matter how apparently philanthropic with good causes, if you get a reputation for treating employees unacceptably, it is akin to a man being known as a wife beater. It's just not done. And Meghan, we all know that she treated the staff terribly. She treated them to be beneath her, as if they, were unintelligent, and she did not treat them with any sense of respect. It had been one thing for Meghan to acquire a reputation for being unfriendly toward Harry's friends and family, but it now became quite another as the word began to spread that she behaved dubiously toward people who were not in a position to defend themselves. That's terrible. One incident, which is meant to have taken place shortly after her marriage, did not bode well for the future, and if it was not invented. Meghan, who is well known for being something of a perfectionist, was accused of hurling onto the floor a dress that had been ironed to her exacting standards, with the imprecation, "You call this pressed? This hasn't been pressed. I want this pressed properly now." Could this be true? Could anyone with aspirations to civility speak to staff like that? Hopefully there was nothing but Chinese whispers. But there was another incident. The next incident involving staff was even more astonishing. Only hoped that it was too made up through the more apocrypha there were, the more likely it was that the tales were rooted in the truth, even when exaggerated or twisted. The time Meghan was on tour, she lost her temper and she threw a hot beverage in the direction of someone who had annoyed her. This had resulted in the member of staff resigning and being paid £250,000 to leave without disclosing the incident. Can you imagine? £250,000 had to be paid because Meghan got annoyed with someone and threw a hot beverage or tea or whatever it was, hot water, on them. And then they had to pay this to keep it quiet. There were a lot of things that I know that the palace was keeping quiet and that the papers were keeping out of print because this was, with indifference to the royal family. They wanted to respect them and honor them, but people were hearing about and saw and witnessed what Meghan was doing, and it just wasn't getting out there. And I think in a way this did her a disservice, but I think people were afraid that she was going to try to play the race card. But what was happening is Meghan was getting away with all these tantrums and all these incidents and breaking of royal protocol, and there was never any consequence. If you are doing something wrong, you must be held accountable. And if you don't, how are you going to learn your lesson? It's just like a child. But I think they were so afraid of the way Harry had approached them and saying that if he didn't get to marry Meghan, everybody would think the royal family was racist. And by the same token, if they were to say these things that seems so exaggerated, that they might think that they were being racist toward Meghan, which of course it has nothing to do with her color. And I don't know how many times we have to say that, but we all know Meghan plays the race card. Okay, the book says, then the departures began in earnest. One departure from definitely not imagined was the senior communications secretary, Katrina. She had been the liaison with Meghan's family in the early days. She quietly left Kensington Palace Press Office in September of 2018 amid reports of furies of emails descending from her and to her from Meghan, starting every morning at 5 a.m. Meghan was a volcano erupting with idea after idea of how she wanted to shape her new role. 2 months after that, Meghan's personal assistant, Melissa Tobati, left amid claims that Meghan frequently reduced her to tears with her endless demands. Special note of the crucial role she had played in helping to organize the royal wedding for Meghan. This woman went through hell in trying to plan the wedding that Meghan wanted, and then Meghan was still treating her like dirt. To those in the know, this was code for Meghan being impossible, though Meghan and Harry themselves believed that their demands were reasonable. Then, 2 months after Melissa's tearful departure, the revolving door again creaked into action when it was announced that Amy Pickerel, Meghan's assistant private secretary, who was often described as her right-hand woman, would be exiting when Meghan and Harry's baby was born. She was then joined by the communications secretary for the Sussexes and the Cambridges, Jason Knopf, who was leaving to become chief executive of the Royal Foundation of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Wow, so there goes four. The Royal Foundation had been set up in September 2009 before William and Harry's marriages as a vehicle for their charity work. And then, out of my own words, and then when Meghan came along, she was going to have none of this. She didn't want to work and be part of the Fab Four. She wanted to do whatever she wanted to do, and didn't want anybody to tell her how to do it. All right, not only were the public in Britain turning against her as a result of her attitude, but people closer to home wanted to know how any daughter could have dumped her father the way she had, especially when she herself had always said that he had been an excellent father. This is a question I found the answer to by speaking to people who know the various parties well, including relations of hers and his and hers. I came to the conclusion that Meghan had little choice but to behave as she did. She had established common ground with Harry in the most effective possible way. She had hooked him by appealing to his emotions, presenting herself as a person whose strength had been forged in the crucible of deprivation and pain, just like Harry's, and then she had held the keys to his happiness. Because theirs was a love match, and there was nothing to hold it together but the bonds they had forged together, the relationship's very existence would be threatened if third parties began to feed him information that was contradictory to her representations. So again, she had played this game with Harry, and other people knew the truth, but she couldn't allow Harry to get close to those family members because her story and the facade and, her plot would just all disintegrate. Meghan had led Harry to believe that she had a far harder life than she had had. She had gained his admiration by making herself out to be far more sufficient than she had ever been, to have summoned struggles that did not exist. She had told him how hard she had to struggle to put herself through university, when in fact her time there had been one long joyride on her father's bandwagon. She didn't want Tom Sr. giving the game away, shining a light on those aspects of her persona. There were sound reasons for not introducing Harry to her father. And this was all leading right up to the wedding. She wanted her father to fly in like the day before, show up at the wedding, and leave immediately after. She couldn't allow Harry to have any time with him because she was afraid that the secrets would start flowing. Meghan's harsh, racist world, as she now wanted people to believe, was for no one could identify with the incident throughout her whole life when she had been subjected to such racial prejudice, though everyone could remember many times that she had not been subjected to any prejudice at all. Meghan is not an actress for nothing. She understands drama and appreciates its value. Meghan controlled her father's attendance instead. It was obvious that the safest course of action had been to get Tom Sr. to fly over just before, and there was so much going on that he wouldn't have time to interact too deeply with Harry. Harry is a very emotional person. He has great emotional intelligence, even though he is not outstanding in his intellectual equivalent. Meghan, on the other hand, is highly intelligent, highly skilled socially, and highly effusive. According to people who know them well, Meghan won Harry by appealing to his generally humanitarian instincts. She did this by demonstrating her own humanitarian credentials, articulating philanthropic values when she knew he possessed, while making herself vulnerable in his eyes. She endured herself by appealing to his sympathies, by mirroring them and making him aware of just how she had suffered at the hands of a cruel world, while gaining his admiration for the brave and noble way that she had coped. She could not have Daddy blow this touching picture of suffering, which she had never actually experienced, out of the water by shooting off his mouth. There is so much evidence that suggests that Meghan is by far a stronger and more forceful individual than Harry. Beneath the blustering alpha male lies a sensitive boy who identifies and sympathizes with those who have suffered. For all the good works Meg had done, she had never really suffered loss, and therefore does not possess any similar degree of empathy. Because he has such a nurturing, considerate side to his personality, she makes an ideal mate for a man who loved his mother. She makes an even more ideal mate for one who loved and lost his mother. Her dominance comes across to him as caring. He thinks he's being mothered, when in fact, who knows and questions. Meghan's motives believes he's being controlled. One indication that there might be some substance to that suspicion is the vow Meghan wrote in the marriage service. She swore to protect Harry. And we all know that Meghan was always saying to Harry that, you've got to protect me. You've got to watch out for me. These people are doing this to me. These people are doing that. So she put that in the wedding vows, that she would protect Harry. He was always seeking someone to protect him because of the traumas that he had lived through. Back to the book. How she came to a position herself as the protector of a prince is what fascinates. She was able to convince him that she had successfully survived so much pain and suffering that she had the strength to protect him, a boy who lost his mother and had suffered thereafter, because her suffering had transformed her from an ordinary woman into an extraordinary human being. He, ordinary man that he is, needs her protection. Okay, that is the end of chapter 7, and I'll be back shortly after I finish chapter 8, and we'll go on from there. Please like and share and leave your comments on this video. I'm wanting to make sure that the comment section is working. It is turned on, was never turned off, so please try to leave me a comment so I can see if it's working. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, I should say, to the audio. I hope you're enjoying the book as much as I have, and we'll see you soon. Stay well and be happy.